Hello and welcome to the romance track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. And today we're going to be talking more about Valentine's Day and romance and love. So before we get into all of that good stuff, let's have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with you, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Sugden. I write hockey romances for Harlequin and Entangle Publishing. And as you can probably hear from my voice, I'm from Cambridge in the UK.
And Kate.
I'm Kate Ballinger. I write sexy paranormal romance for Sourcebooks Casablanca, and readers probably best know me for my Cowboy Wolf series, so I'm known as the Seven Range Shifters.
Jerry.
I'm Jerry Russell. I write Scottish historical romance for Thule Publishing, and I've been working on a series about the witch trials in Scotland.
Cool. Nancy Harkness.
Hi, I'm Nancy Harkness. I live in New Jersey. I write contemporary romance with Montlake, and my current series has a touch of suspense as well.
Cool. Richard. Oh, we can't hear you. Try again.
Can you
There we
hear me?
go. Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Richard Amos. I write urban fantasy with slow burn romance, and I'm indie published, and I'm from the UK.
Very nice. And Nancy Northcott.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy with romantic elements for Falstaff Books, and I independently publish several subgenres of romance, including romantic suspense, paranormal romance, which is currently not up because it's being rebranded, and kind of a hybrid romantic spy adventure series.
Very nice. And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write up fantasy steampunk, and Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. So let's get right to the big day. Does anyone here have a Valentine's Day themed story? Anybody with Valentines?
No.
Wow.
I have some short stories, freebie short stories that are associated with my New Jersey Ice Cats hockey romance series. And they will be on my website. Actually, I'm giving them away free, but you can also get them in my short story anthology. So yeah, I do have a couple of Valentine's themed ones.
I have a short story that is in my Badlands series that's free on Prolific Works, and it brings together two pining World War II era ghosts.
Aw.
Yeah, aw. So what's the deal? Bunch of romance authors here. Nobody's writing about Valentine's Day. What do you think about this day? Love it, hate it? And I'm just going to let people jump in as long as you aren't stepping on each other. Just, take it and run. What do you love or hate about Valentine's Day?
We stopped celebrating Valentine's Day on Valentine's Day in a big way when our son was small, because we couldn't get a sitter. I mean, get a sitter for Valentine's Day. Yeah, good luck with that. So we give each other a card. Most of the time I get flowers, which is nice. And then we go out for a really nice dinner about a week later when sitters were available. And then that just became our habit. So Valentine's Day didn't mean a whole big thing for us. And we just kind of drifted along in the grip of inertia and let it stay that way. We're very big on inertia here.
Well, and the roses have got to be a lot cheaper a week later too, right?
Yeah. Everything does.
Well, I'm not a big fan of roses. I prefer gerbera daisies, so I do quite well out of Valentine's Day. But I think we kind of got fed up with the sort of the commercialism of it all, and the being forced to be romantic. We're much more of the being romantic as and when, rather than being told you have to be romantic on Valentine's Day. And I think for romance writers, I think that's what a lot of romance writers kind of feel, is this sort of, it's not just about one day.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with Nancy. I have small children, so I never celebrate on Valentine's Day. There's never a sitter available. So we always celebrate either slightly before or slightly after. So the day of doesn't mean much. And but I enjoyed the celebration when we have it. But I think also set up with Valentine's Day because of all the poorly written romance think pieces that come out around this time of year from people who have never read a romance novel in their life. So that kind of casts a poor shade over the holiday.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of pouring shade over the holiday, some years ago when Borders still existed, they decided that they were going to celebrate Valentine's Day at the Borders here by having people read aloud from bad romances.
Oh.
And word of that got around, and the woman who was then president of our local RWA chapter had a word with Borders to the effect that, you know, romance is really good for your bottom line. And if word gets around that you are dissing romance on Valentine's Day, you can look at a lot of people going to Barnes and Noble instead.
Oh.
And they changed their minds about that. I mean, she just single-handedly went, no, we're not having that, and stepped in and changed it. I didn't mean to cut anybody off. I just wanted to pick that up while I thought about it.
Good
No,
for
that's a
her.
good point.
Yeah, like Nancy said, you know, we're very practical people. Our kids are grown now, but 3 of them try getting a sitter. And the menus change. So it's always a more expensive, fewer options menu, if you could even get in. And so we're much more, okay, we'll eat when the menus go back to the normal selection and the normal price in a regular year when you can go do those things. And if you get the roses at Trader Joe's, you can also go, here's a bundle of roses, and they were really inexpensive. So you can feel good about the price and the roses. Twofer. What happens in established relationships? It's a whole different level of romance.
I don't know if Richard will agree with me, but having lived on both sides of the Atlantic, Valentine's Day over here isn't quite as intense as it is over in the States. I mean, it has become more so in recent years. But, you know, when I was a kid, we didn't exchange Valentines, and there really wasn't very much. Rich is probably a lot younger than me, but we didn't exchange Valentines. It wasn't such a big deal. So it's only really recently that it's become the huge deal or more of a deal that it is in the US.
Yeah, it wasn't like that when I was a kid either. It was it's only just, I mean, I've never ever done a Valentine's Day either, because like Anna said, it just feels too commercial. And it's like, why does it have to be one day? Like one day a year you tell someone you love them. It's just, I find it a bit strange, the whole concept.
When the kids were little, it was always fun to let them pick out the little kid Valentines. It could be like superheroes or Disney princesses, or what was it going to be? And it was almost like picking a Halloween costume, you know, what was it going to be? And then you got the lollipops to go with them. And that was kind of fun. And then they outgrew it, and you know, well, that's over.
Yeah, you see, we didn't do that. I mean, I went to school in the US as well for a couple of years, so I actually did do it. But over here, the kids don't have a Valentine for every child in the class. And actually, we didn't have Halloween and dressing up. We didn't do that either. Come to think of it. So none of that. We didn't have that. We don't have that background at all. Very different culture when it comes to stuff like that.
And yet you have so much better chocolate. I mean,
well, there is that.
Yeah.
But then it's not just for Valentine's Day.
This is true. So what is romantic to you? You know, if it's not Valentine's Day, if it can be any time, which, you know, hopefully we're not just stuck with one day a year to be romantic. What is romantic to you, or what isn't romantic? Anybody jump in and start the ball?
I think the small things are more romantic. You know, like I was thinking about this the other day. the small things when you've been with someone for a long time. I've been with my partner for about 14 years, and it's, you know, the little caring moments, like when they make a drink for you, or when you wake up with them and they ask you, are you feeling happy this morning? And little sweet things like that, rather than the grand sweeping gestures. That to me is romance.
I also like the element of surprise. I think it's very romantic when your partner walks in the door with, you know, like a single Gerbera daisy for Anna for no reason whatsoever, except he was thinking of you when he saw it and it made him think of you. And I love that little, you know, I wasn't expecting that moment.
Mm.
My husband's a very practical man, and early in our relationship, he knew I liked roses. So he decided to go out and buy me not a dozen roses, but a dozen rose bushes so that I could have roses all the time. And it's sweet that, you know, he thought beyond just the moment into, you know, they keep growing and growing and blooming, and I have roses all the time. It's those kind of things that are romantic.
It's also nice because it's your husband's practical, so it's appropriate to him as opposed to just being what other people would do.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've been married for 33 years, and so it ranges from the really big gesture, like the needle-phobic husband who holds your hand and tries not to pass out when you're getting an epidural in the delivery room, and the needle's that big, seemed that big at the time. Okay, honey, I've got your hand. I just can't look. You're there. I appreciate that. To the, I'm going to take the garbage out because I know you hate taking the garbage out. You know, and we both hate taking the garbage out. So that's an opportunity for us both to jump in. But yeah, I agree. It's the little things. Nancy, how about you? Nancy Northcott.
Oh, me. I like the little things too, the things that are day in and day out. But I like surprises. When we were first dating, I couldn't find my lotion. And I get obsessive when I can't find something. It really irritates the living daylights out of me. And I have to turn the place upside down. And I had turned my apartment upside down and not found the freaking lotion. So I went off to work in a really bad mood. And he had a key to my apartment at that point because we were getting pretty serious. And I came home from work to eat lunch. And there on the dinette table was a bottle of my preferred lotion with a vase with 3 yellow carnations in it.
Oh,
And it was just a perfect surprise, you know, and things like that are nice. And things like Gail was saying, we take out the trash. Well, he just recently took out the dead mouse, and I really appreciate that.
So anybody have a funny story of a Valentine's Day went wrong? It could be a long ago date or something that, you know, a good story you've heard or something that happened to your characters. I won't tell mine in detail because I told it on a different panel, but my first date with Larry, I joked that he had to marry me to keep me from taking him on more dates, because every single thing I picked, trying to show off the city to its best advantage, trying to take him to these romantic things, it turned out he was allergic to it, or it wasn't his kind of thing. You know, I didn't ask any of these things because I wanted it to be a surprise. It was like supposed to be the perfect date. It was failure after failure after failure, and so of course we got married. But it was like, I think I overthought this. I love to see that kind of thing in a story where it turns the trope on its head, where you think they're going to be having this incredibly Hallmark romantic moment, and I don't know, somebody sets the table or turns on the smoke alarm or something, you know, something that kind of throws it a whole different direction. Or do your characters have better luck than I did?
Oh, I had a particularly romantic moment one Valentine's Day with a former love. As I said, I like red roses in the garden and stuff, but I don't find red roses romantic for the reason that they are kind of cliched. And this particular man had brought me no Valentine's card, but a red rose that he'd bought from a petrol station locally, still in the petrol station bag, and just handed it to me like that.
Power.
And it was just like, yeah, the amount of thought that went into that was really, I should have known then. So yeah, that's my Valentine's Day that didn't work out.
And it's really the thought, isn't it? It you know, I get credit even though everything I picked didn't work out the way I thought it was, because it really looked like a lovely date on paper and I tried. And sometimes that's all you can come away with, isn't it? You know?
Oh yeah.
Or do things always work out for your characters the way they planned? Jerry, you're shaking your head. Tell us about it.
The best part is when I had a story once with a heroine who was, it was basically the bachelorette in medieval Scotland. And so she had 5 suitors for her hand in marriage, and she couldn't figure out which one she wanted to marry. So she decided to do a competition, and they're all super excited about this because they're warriors. So they're thinking, you know, armed combat and all this stuff. No, she made them sew and cook and, you know, do sweet little things for her. And it was very funny to watch them go through that very painful process, especially the sewing one, of, you know, trying to make something for her. And they tried very hard, but it didn't work. Those are the kind of things that I like, torturing them so that it shows their true personality.
Well, I did a book once. My critique partners complained because they would get, you know, a chapter or two once a month. And for some reason, I felt like frustrating my characters in this book. So they would get right up to the moment they were about to kiss, and then something would stop them. And then the next time it happened, something would stop them again. And my critique partners finally said, "Oh, for God's sake, just let them kiss. We can't take it anymore." So yeah, it's fun to do stuff like that. But we like to torture our characters, right? Otherwise there'd be no story.
Yeah, I like to be mean to my characters. They have to suffer before they're happy.
Of course.
When people say,
Several of mine almost.
oh, sorry.
Go no, go ahead, Nancy.
Well, when people say, so which one of your characters would you really like to be? And I'm like, none of them. I put them through the mill. Why would I want to do that? No.
Yeah, I mean, several of mine almost died, you know, before they really figure out that that's the grand gesture, is racing in to save the other person's life, whether it's from a mafia hitman or a deranged paranormal serial killer or a dark witch lord, as the case may be. So, you know, it's like life or death there at the moment. No, I really don't want to swap places with any of my characters. They're much braver than I am. Now, how about the anti-Valentine's Day trope? You know, the curmudgeon, the one who doesn't believe that there's ever going to be anybody, or a person who just hates Valentine's Day. Have you ever played with that trope, or had somebody who, you know, really kind of had to get bashed on the head before they knew what was going on? Clueless counts too.
One of my characters from one of my series, it took him a long time to accept the fact that he could be loved, because he had quite a horrible upbringing. So I quite liked writing that, kind of like that trope where he has to realize that there is love in the world. It isn't all doom and gloom, and you are worthy of being loved.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've done that.
Kate, you've been quiet for a while. I see you hiding over there.
So I would say most of my heroes are kind of grumpy curmudgeons at the beginning in a way. And then they have to be put through the ringer in various, you know, different variations for each one. But I would say that the grumpiest among them in regard to romance was the hero of the third book in my series. His name's Rogue, and it's from Wicked Cowboy Wolf. And he has this really, you know, dark background and has basically the belief that all romances end tragically. And of course, you know, it's a romance novel. His romance is not going to end tragically. So he kind of has to overcome that belief that, you know, love is not something that ever works out for people.
Well, so this is a group of writers. I had one character, hero, Gavin Miller, who's a writer, and he has really severe writer's block. So tell me, would you be able to fall in love if you were suffering through really severe writer's block? What do you think? Doesn't that put you in a pretty bad mood, right? Put him in a really bad mood.
That just immediately throws me into the opening scenes of Romancing the Stone, except she doesn't have writer's block. She's writing the song, she's sobbing and tearing the pages through the type.
That is such a wonderful opening. All those tissues. Yes.
All those tissues.
Well, I have a hero who is under a blood curse because an ancestor did something really, really bad. And so he cursed his whole bloodline until they atoned for it. So he intended to be the last one. So when the heroine crosses his horizon and he starts to develop feelings for her, it was a real struggle for him. And I think in general, in romance, that struggle is what makes the story worth it. It is the story. And a lot of people who don't read romance think that any book that's got a little bit of romance in it, or that has, God save us, a sex scene in it, well, that's a romance, you know, and really it's not, because as we all understand, the spine of a romance novel is the romantic struggle of the characters. In this particular book that I'm talking about, it's the romance is a subplot. It's a strong romantic elements book because it's a historical fantasy, but that's his conflict. And so I think if you write a romantic arc where nobody struggles at all, it can still be interesting, but it can't be the main story because we're all in it to see the train go from no chance at all to happily ever after station, to be a little corny about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and I think that if the characters, even if they fundamentally believe in the possibility of love and finding that happily ever after, I think oftentimes in a romance novel, there's something about themselves that they have deemed fundamentally unlovable that they have to learn to overcome, and that I can love myself and love someone else and everything's all right.
Yeah, so far I haven't written characters who are young enough for this to be a first love. So everybody comes to it with baggage and some sort of bad relationship, or since I write male, number of my characters were not welcomed by their family after they came out. So they're carrying around a lot of baggage. And you're right, Kate, that learning that you're lovable is kind of important before you can let somebody else love you or accept that they love you. And that's always a big part of it too, especially if you've been hurt before, because it's scary to try again.
Oh yeah, and a lot of tension is created in romance novels, I think, by that fear of, if I allow myself this happiness, you know, this thing that I want, what happens? What are the consequences? Will I ultimately find out that I really am unlovable, right?
Jerry, you've been quiet, so I have to come looking for you.
Well, I just think that, you know, yeah, we all write kind of the same thing, but even in the real world, people feel that they're not lovable. I mean, look at all the online dating that even during plagues, it's continuing to happen. But, you know, we all have our shields that we put up, things that we try to hide. And as writers, you know, we live in the real world and we look at these people around us, and a lot of people that don't like romance think that it's because we overhype it, that, you know, that doesn't exist. But when you really do find that one person that is the person for you in real life, that is like the best thing ever. And we make that happen on the page again and again and again, because, you know, all of us experience that. All of us have that in our lives. We know it's true. So, you know, we're all advocates of relationships, whatever those relationships are.
Yes.
I read a statistic a while ago, and I don't know if it still holds, but I kind of like it. I hope it does. It said that more marriages have resulted from people playing World of Warcraft together than from Match.com. And I can believe this because, you know, until you've really gone looting and pillaging with someone, you don't really know them. The person who leaves you to fight all the orcs while they scamper away and grab all the gold, I mean, that's a bad sign. So I just read that, and having, you know, played role-playing games myself, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you'd really get to know a person doing that.
I love
You
that.
would.
In a
Try to make
similar
a hockey game with them.
This is true. Are they fighting with you or beside you?
In a similar vein, my husband, when we were dating, refused to ever play Monopoly with me because he said that I would not marry him if I played Monopoly with him because he was so vicious.
I can believe that. You know, that competition, that competitive streak can come out.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better.
Little did he know that I am equally as competitive. So it was a good match.
Speaking of which, you know, you brought up good matches, and sometimes you have opposites attract, or you have people who everybody else looks at them and goes, huh? But they're perfect for each other. Have you ever brought that in or had characters who thought that about themselves?
Oh yeah. But I mean, for me personally, I like to sort of play with that trope in different variations. So like the first book in my 7-Range Shifter series, I think it's opposites in the fact that he's a wolf, she's not. And then you've got like enemies to lovers, I think kind of plays on that trope too. They both have different goals, different ideals. And so I think a lot of, you know, well-known romance tropes are just sort of variations of opposites attract, right? And I definitely play with that a lot. I have particularly, I had mentioned Wicked Cowboy Wolf before. That's my 3rd book in my series. And that one definitely plays with opposites attract because the hero is this sort of very dark anti-hero, and the heroine is like definitely an opposite to that. She's artistic and sunshiny and optimistic, right? And so they really just, you know, it's that grumpy sunshine trope that we love in romance, where you don't think they're ever going to mix with one another, but of course, you know, she brings sunshine to his darkness. He kind of grounds her in reality a little bit, so they end up, you know, evening each other out, and it's about that balance, I think.
In my story in Christmas at Canaan Castle, The Last Favor, the hero has always been grounded in family, even though it was just him and his parents, and then it was just him and his dad. And as the story opens, it's just him because his father's recently died. And so the holiday and all the family emphasis on the holiday is kind of making him question his life choice to be a secret agent and a loner. And his partner is there watching his back as part of the suspense plot. And she comes from a family that is broken and should have broken sooner because the atmosphere in the family was so toxic. And so for her, she just decided long ago that marriage and family, she didn't know how to do that. And if she tried to do that, she would just screw it up. And so it's a similar kind of thing. He's a family man and beginning to feel more and more like that's what he wants to focus on as the story goes on. And she is totally terrified to take that step. And I think a lot of romance novels are built on that, not just fear of getting hurt, but terrified that you're going to mess it up and mess up this person you care about in the process.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, people appear more different on the surface than they are underneath. My Badlands series has a psychic medium and a skeptical homicide cop. And the homicide cop had an experience with the supernatural in a case, and it lost him his job. And so he really doesn't believe in these woo-woo types. And the psychic came from kind of a very cold, emotionally distant family. And so, you know, he lost his last job and he lost his lover. Now he's starting over. And so they really start not trusting each other. and working toward that trust, and with Vic coming to realize that the woo-woo stuff is actually real in some cases. And they go home to Vic's huge, loud Italian Catholic family in Pittsburgh. And he's the middle brother. And he's got bigger brothers grabbing him and giving him noogies. And now all of a sudden, you know, Simon gets to see him in a very different role, and a family that accepts him, you know, lock, stock, barrel, paranormal vision. And yeah, he's gay. So what? He's my brother. And that just kind of changes everything. And I love seeing characters start out apart from each other and then turn that corner and start to see more how they're alike than how they're different. That to me is just one of the most wonderful parts of the buildup.
Well, and I think, isn't that why romance is such a wonderful genre? Because it is about people coming to understand that they're more alike than they are different, and opening themselves up to that realization and that vulnerability. I mean, that's what makes romance so wonderful, I think.
So is there a trope that you haven't played with yet that you'd like to someday? Or maybe one that you might not ever, or one that you just love to read?
So most of my books are had been enemies to lovers, and so I had recently sort of remedied the fact that I had a trope I wanted to play with that I hadn't yet, and it was just the opposite of enemies to lovers, which is friends to lovers, right? And I think I had kind of resisted writing that for a long time, because I like enemies to lovers exactly because of the escapism of it. Like, you know, I don't imagine myself ever falling in love with an actual enemy in real life. But my husband and I were a friends to lovers romance. We were friends for several years, dating other people before we ever considered dating each other. And so I think there was a level of fear that I wasn't going to execute this right. But I did that for my most recent book, which is the 5th one in my 7 Range Shifter series, which won't be out for a while now. But it was kind of refreshing to go into a trope that I had kind of resisted for so long. And I always try to incorporate new tropes that I haven't used before, because I think that keeps things interesting. But this one was the biggest leap, and that was really fun for me.
I'm part of an anthology called Who's Your Daddy? A DNA anthology. And I was looking at my story, even though a DNA test is involved, because every story in the anthology had to have that. I was looking at it as a kind of second chance at love, friends to lovers story. And the heroine is raising her sister's daughter, who, unbeknownst to either of them at the beginning of the story, is the hero's child, and unbeknownst to him as well. Now, I've always had a problem with the secret baby story, because I mean, to me, you have to have a lot of justification for keeping a baby secret. So I was really looking at it more as dynamic between the adults, and writing that story was like slogging through molasses. It just was not coming. And I couldn't figure out why. And all of a sudden, like the literal bolt from the blue, it hit me. And so I called one of my brainstorming group and went, I figured out why I'm having so much story with this. It's a secret. I mean, so much trouble with it. It's a secret baby story. And she's like, and? Because apparently everyone but me had noticed that the focus of the story needed to be the secret baby trope. So we got on the phone and worked out the circumstances surrounding why this child's parentage was unknown to everybody in her life, because her mother had died when she was an infant and hadn't told anybody. And so after that, the story clicked right along. But I was struggling with a trope that makes me uncomfortable, and didn't even have the sense to realize that this needed to be the center of the story, probably because it makes me uncomfortable. So that's the only time I've done that trope, and I probably won't do it again, because I think for me, there's a limited set of circumstances where that works.
Anybody ever done a soulmates or a fated mates or a one true pairing kind of thing?
I did that years ago and regretted it.
Why?
Because I think, well, this was for my first novel, which was with Harlequin, and it was called Twilight Hunter. They chose the title, not me. I did not like that title. The rights have since reverted on this series, so I'm allowed to say these things now. But I'm planning on re-releasing those books, and I'm kind of going back to them and reworking them at the moment. And I did the fated mate sort of trope in that one. And he's a werewolf hunter who is also part werewolf, and she is a female pack master. And I had them, fated to be together. And, I think I enjoyed writing it at the time, but just coming back to that trope years later, I don't really like the fated mates trope, despite being a paranormal author. I want them to work for their romance a little harder. So I did write it, but then regretted it now.
I've done both fated mate and soulmate, with the caveat that you don't have to accept that if you don't want it. Just because fate serves that up to you, you can say no. And so they still have to struggle. It's not like, oh my gosh, my eyes are opened and you're the one for me. It's like, oh crap, that's what I get. And so they have to work toward it. It's not an automatic. But that's a little easier sometimes also when you're dealing with shifters and some of those where it goes a little more with the overall community.
Although,
Well, folks,
in a way,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying, in a way, that's kind of like an arranged marriage in circles, right? So you can put a lot of conflict in that. I mean, I kind of am jealous of you guys being able to do that in paranormal. It sounds like fun to me.
Well, yeah, you're right. It is very much kind of like the arranged marriage where they actually end up liking each other at the end, or something works out finally for them to get the right person.
Yeah, I think it can be fun. I think it was for me just being a baby writer at the time. Like, I didn't do it the way that now the writer me would think is appropriate, sort of thing. And I think it's very easy when you're writing that trope to fall into the idea of insta love. Like they're meant to be together, so they're gonna instantly, everything works out great, right? But like Gail was saying, when you make it more of a struggle, or I'm going to resist this, I think that makes it a little bit more interesting.
One of my favorite authors who does that is Nalini Singh.
Oh yeah.
Sisters, because they're, they have the mating bond that falls into place whether they really want it to or not. And more often than not, they're really not happy about it. And on the occasions when they are happy about it, there are all these other surrounding complications that make it not such a good thing. And, that's a consistent motif in that series. And she manages to keep it from ever getting stale, which I think is a real accomplishment.
Well, folks, we are actually at the end of our time. So I'd love to go around again, have everybody talk about if you've got a book that's recently out or coming out or will be out shortly or on pre-order, whatever it is, tell us about it. And where to find you on social media. So I'm going to start with Nancy Northcott and go around backwards this time.
All righty. I have a website, nancynorthcott.com. I'm on Twitter more often than is good for me. And there I'm at Nancy Northcott. And that's probably the easiest way to actually connect with me. My latest release is my story in the Trick or Treat at Caneham Castle anthology. And I've also separately released The Last Favor from the Christmas anthology. And that's pretty much it for now.
Okay. Richard?
So you can find me best on Facebook, Richard Amos Author, or in my reader group, Richie's Round Table. I had a new book come out on Friday. It's the second in my new series, Fallen Fire is the name of the series. And it has dragons and angels and catnip cigarettes and crazy, dark fantasy things and romance, of course.
Nancy Harkness.
I just had a book come out at the beginning of this month, The Agent. It's the third book in my consultant series, and it's contemporary romance, as I said, with a touch of suspense. A hair salon owner acquires a stalker, and a former FBI agent helps her scrape him off. You can find me mostly on Facebook. And also I have a website, nancyharkness.com.
Cool. Jerry?
My latest release is Much Ado About a Scot, It's part of the All the King's Men series. As I said, it's about the Berwick witch trials in Scotland. And you can find me at Jerry Russell on Facebook and jerryrussell.net online.
Awesome. Caitlin.
Oh, me. Sorry, there was a delay. So my latest release is Wicked Cowboy Wolf. That's the third in my 7-Range Shifter series as far as paperbacks and ebooks go, but I did just have an audiobook of book 1 in the series come out, Cowboy Wolf Treble. And then I also have a recent sort of freebie release up with 1001 Dark Nights. It's a short story anthology with me and like 35 other authors that's free to grab right now. And readers can find me on pretty much most social platforms, but I probably chat most frequently with readers via my newsletter. I love to email back and forth with them. So they can find me at kateballinger.com.
Very nice. Anna?
Okay, well, I'm probably most often on Facebook. I'm trying out Instagram because I have a new release coming on the 22nd of February, and that seems to be where a lot of the publicity goes. My website is annasugden.com. Most of you here won't have seen it yet, and it's on paper, but this is my first book for my new series with Entangled. It's called Hot on the Ice. It's the Docker's Score series. And I've also just recently re-released the first 3 books in my New Jersey Ice Cat series with, and I have to show him because he's just so gorgeous. So the re-release covers are out this week as well. So
very nice. And let's see, as Morgan Bryce, I've got the audiobook for Loose Ends that just came out. That's the 4th book in my Badlands series. And the latest release has been Imaginary Lover, which was part of the Beyond the Realms series, but it's set in my Fox Hollow universe, which is shifters and supernatural creatures and all that. And coming up next is a story in a multi-author paranormal romance retelling of classic fairy tales with a male-male romance twist that'll be out in March. And then another multi-author series project that'll be coming out in April. And so got a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire, and you can find me most often on Facebook, but you can also find me at morganbryce.com. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today and talking about romance and Valentine's Day and falling in love and all that good stuff. And thank you for watching and listening here at ConTinual. Stay tuned. We have a lot more romance coming your way. See you online.